apologetics is necessary for the cultural relevance of the church. Western culture is now post Christian, and Christianity is rarely given serious consideration in the public square. First off, the Bible commands us to be prepared to make a defense for what we believe. In 1 Peter 3:15, we see Peter writes, "But sanctify Christ as the Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence." Furthermore, we see Paul's instructions for us to imitate him as he imitated Christ. 1 Corinthians 11:1, "Be imitators of me, just as I also am of Christ." So, what are some of the things that Paul did that he imitated Jesus and that we are to do? Well, one, we see in Acts 17 when Paul is in Athens that it was his custom to reason with the lost regarding the truth of the gospel. In this chapter alone, we see Paul reason with them using scriptures. He reasoned with them using what was observable in the world and even uses the Greek poets, so some of their own poets, to reach them. So Paul knew, intellectually knew, and used God's word. He also used what was evidence in the world. Now, in today's context, that would be like us using science and historical fact and even in philosophy to reach those that are lost. When he quoted the Greek poets, that would be similar to us knowing some of the ideas that permeate our culture today and shape the thoughts and beliefs of those that we're speaking to and wanting to reach. We also know likewise that Jesus pointed to evidence. Think about when John sent his disciples asking if Jesus was the one to come or if there was another that John should be waiting on. Jesus answered John's disciples and he said, "Go and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them." Jesus turned John's disciples into eyewitnesses that could provide testimony to John as evidence. Second, apologetics works for the preservation of the faith. Not only does apologetics defend the faith from external objections, but apologetics also defends the faith from internal false teachings that would lead believers towards non orthodox and even heretical views of the faith. See, consider Paul's pleading with the Galatians regarding the following teachings of the Judaizers that proclaimed circumcision was necessary for salvation. This was one of the very first heresies that the church had to face and address at the Council of Jerusalem. And following that, we see centuries of councils where Christian leaders are defending the orthodox teachings of the faith from heretical teachings that were misleading believers. Finally, apologetics is necessary for the cultural relevance of the church. Western culture is now post Christian, and Christianity is rarely given serious consideration in the public square. And so apologetics not only helps the believers stand firm in their faith, but also in developing a true perception of the world through what is called a biblical worldview. By living a biblical worldview, Christians can effectively be the salt and light in a pluralistic culture that continually accepts multiple conflicting beliefs about truth. J. Gresham Machen said this. He said, "The chief obstacle to the Christian religion today lies in the sphere of the intellect. The church is perishing today through the lack of thinking, not through an excess of